agency. So it'd be like a combination where people maybe had like a seizure disorder, but also a mobility issue. So it'd be difficult for them to find work. And we would have these, like, we called it ERT, employment readiness training. So it was back to basics. So the back to basics training was really for people who'd been out of the workforce for quite a long time. And we spent like one day on how to make a resume and cover letter, another day on how to use the computer to apply for jobs. And like, so some people in these classes had been maybe in prison for like 15 or 20 years and didn't know how to use a computer. So it was like at that level that we were working with people. Like maybe it was their first job ever, and they actually needed a lot of help. So we would find a lot of behaviors that people would do in this class because they had anxiety about, I mean, and I'm speculating, sometimes it was because they had anxiety about something like that they didn't think that they were adequate. They didn't think they'd be able to get a job, or they didn't think that they could use a computer or something like that. Sometimes I don't know what it was about. I couldn't like see into their head. But we definitely had a few people disclose to us that like school wasn't a safe place for them, that they had been kicked out of school or they'd been bullied or abused in school. And so like being in a classroom in the first place was just like, ooh, like they hated it. And people will react to that in different ways. Now, some people will react in a way that we think is kind of like stereotypical, like acting out, right? And you can see this with kids and with adults. Actually, working with kids in groups will give you a lot of context and a lot of tools that you can use with adults. So like we would see some adults who would complain like every 5 or 6 minutes, like, where's the bathroom? It's hot in here. I need a new pencil. I didn't get that worksheet. I don't know what page we're on. Like very persistent. And I think a lot of it was like just anxiety, wanting someone to pay attention to them, wanting someone to like maybe wanting one of the staff people to just be near them. Other times though, people might co-opt power in this sort of like roundabout way, like making snide comments or not showing up and then showing up maybe like 45 minutes later and like drawing attention. So all this is to say that people come into groups with their own fears and anxieties, and they may not know to express that as like, I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling anxious, but they will maybe take power in certain ways where they feel powerless. And so it's really important to just actually address power in the group and just talk about like, yeah, I'm the group leader and I'm the person who's here to facilitate the group. However, I need all of you to help me out. I need this to be like an equal process for this to work, and to give people power in ways that you can, so that you're not seeing them co-opt it. And if you've ever worked with youth, like teenagers, especially in groups, you'll notice that there's usually like one or two who are like very vocal. And if you can get them to be on your side and like with the idea of the group and like for the group, then the group will work a lot better because you've lent them some of your power instead of them having to take it. And when they have to take it, then that's them usually taking people out of the purpose of the group. So yeah, but you want to push people a little bit. It should not be comfortable all the time. They should be having some growth, but not being pushed so far that they're afraid or feel unsafe. So group stages, there's a ton of different group stages. Like every textbook has a different one. My favorite one is the Tuckman one, just because I can remember it. It rhymes. It's forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. So essentially all group conceptualizations have something like a beginning, middle, and end. The middle stage is where all the work gets done. And that's the hard one. That's where like people's behaviors come out. That's where people get upset with one another or they try to drop out of the group and things like that. So we look at Tuckman's rhyme, you're forming. So like, what is this group for? We're all showing up. Storming, we're trying to figure out what our roles are, what we're doing here, like who's the boss, who's the most powerful one, how are we all going to fit into this group? And then we establish our norms. Now, so a lot of times in groups, and I do this in class, right? In class, we'll talk about these are our group norms. Those aren't the real group norms. Those are the group norms that like I will say are the group rules, but the group norms are actually like a level deeper that are being established by the group all of the time. So for example, one of the group norms may be that like there's one person who's sort of elected by our class who is the person who asks the questions first, right? And that's not a negative thing. That's just like a role that the person took on. But did I at the beginning of class go like, hey, Julia is going to be the one who asks the questions first. No, that's something that the class kind of elected as a group and allowed to happen. And it's not necessarily negative, but that's kind of how norms happen. They don't actually happen that first day, they're happening after the process happens. And so then the performing is the actual group work. So you're not getting to performing until you have those norms established and people feel safe and comfortable enough to do it. Not too comfortable though, because if people are too comfortable in a group, they're probably not doing any actual soul searching and work. It should be a little hard, right? So then adjourning, you need to actually have some ending of your group. You need to have some point at which you realize like either this many days has passed or there is a goal that you accomplish as a group. And then it's good to have some kind of ritual or some kind of goodbye around that. You can also expect people to have some behaviors come up around adjourning because a lot of people have not had good goodbyes. Like they've maybe had people leave their life without saying goodbye, or they feel intense about rejection. All right. So ethics. So this is what scares everyone. um so ethics is just different in groups. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just different. There's more, I think there's more potential for conflict, but within that there's more potential for conflict resolution. So things are less likely to be swept under the rug. Verbal abuse between members or people like breaching confidentiality. I think those are pretty big. Some of the things that I think, so that's pretty big. You'd probably notice it and address it in the moment. Some of the things that are a little more sneaky, I would say like haphazard screening, dependencies, or like problems when the sessions end. If the leader is influencing in a way that they don't quite know. So an example of that may be like a leader has a subtle bias towards a certain type of group member, whatever that may be. Then people will start to kind of perceive that and they might talk about it amongst themselves, but the group leader doesn't know. I would say if you can do it, it's always best to have a co-leader in your group. If not for just the practical aspect of like when people need to go to the bathroom, or like when we did our ERT, we would have to chase people down from their smoke breaks. I mean, like we were this huge building. It used to be an RC Cola factory, which is like an old soda that I don't think anyone drinks anymore. Maybe in the South, I don't know. Although I think we're in the South here. Digression. So it was this huge bottling plant that this building that I worked in. It was enormous. And they had like one smoker deck area, and the outside there's a huge courtyard that wrapped around the whole building. But it was like in a sort of factory part of town. So people would just like be lost. Like we would go out to the smoking area and they would not be there. But to go around the entire building would take like a good 15 minutes and you would be like huffing and puffing after that. So we would have to have two people because we would have a break and we needed to have one person in the group like just kind of be in the classroom for the people who came back from the break, because it's not fair for them if they have to sit around for 20 minutes while you're looking for someone who's just gone on a rogue smoking break. But then also sometimes people would leave in the middle and they would be upset and they would want us to come out and give them individual attention because they didn't want to bring it up in front of the group. So sometimes people would like stay out a little bit longer and then you'd come and talk to them and they'd be like, yeah, I just don't really feel comfortable in this class. This is what's happening for me. And that would actually be a really good restorative moment. So if you can ever help it, have two people leading your group. It's really good. They can also check and balance if you're being biased or if you're not being fair or you're not giving enough time, that kind of thing. Different styles of group leaders tend to be really good too. Like I had several different coworkers that I'd rotate with to lead groups, and they all just brought like very different things to the group. And I really just like, I saw the way that we could kind of play off each other when we led groups after, like I did it like 6 or 7 times with each person. And we kind of got into our own stride of knowing what we're each good at. It's a really great experience. So I'd say screening. I think screening is a big problem within agencies. Speaking from my own experience, we just got whoever was going through the program. So there was just sort of like a series of programming and then they would land in the ERT class. And we would have sometimes a class that was like, it was like 6 people and they were just at totally different levels with different things, or there was like people who had, how do I say this? Like they had mental illness symptoms that were really clashing with one another. Like maybe someone who had like some sensory stuff going on where they couldn't handle noises, and someone else who couldn't stop making noise. So like that was a problem that we had a lot of times, that if we had better screening and we were actually asking that kind of thing and kind of weeding people out, we would have done better. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just got what you got, and you just try to like divide people up or make space better for them or give headphones to somebody. Like we just had to kind of improvise. Dependency is interesting too. If you're in like a support group, I think that can happen a lot, where one person maybe becomes emotionally dependent on another member of the group, and that's not healthy for either one of them because they're both there for growth. So you do want people to rely on each other a little bit, but you don't want them to tip over to the point where one person is now like junior therapist and they're not getting the help and support that they need. All right, so these I really like. This is my favorite slide. The slightly unethical behaviors, AKA lies. These are things that we say at the beginning of a group that are just not true, so let's not say them. Like you will get into groups, you've probably been to trainings before, and you've gotten in to that setting and you're like, okay, so this is what this is gonna be like, now I'm comfortable. And part of that comfort is like having these kinds of placating statements that are said to us. I bet at some point, maybe with classes, maybe in some group setting, like a support group, or maybe in a training, you've been to a training where you're like, or you've been to a setting, sorry, where you were like, oh, this is a different type of setting. I need to be engaged here. That's what we want. We want that actually. We want that, like, this is different. This feels different. We don't want the like passive classroom experience kind of thing of like being in like high school algebra, if that makes sense. Okay, so like things we might say, you don't have to say or do anything unless you want to. Is that completely true in your group? You need to give informed consent about what participation means and what it doesn't mean, and if participation is mandatory or if there are repercussions for not participating. So that statement should be amended. You should say, if you like, let's say that somebody is in the class because it's a probation requirement, you say you have to show up like 3 out of 5 times, and you have to be less than 10 minutes late, and you can't miss more than this amount of tests, and that counts as participation. And we would like for you to like verbally participate in class at least a couple of times. That's a good quantifier. Now, you notice I'm not telling them what they have to say. They could say pass. We can give them the option to say pass. Like if something is too emotionally uncomfortable, let them say pass, but you need to quantify what's participation, because you don't want people in your class who aren't participating. That affects the whole class. This is a safe place for you to work on yourself. I can't ensure that this is a safe place. I don't know all the people in this group. If I've done my due diligence, which maybe happens 50% of the time in a real group setting where you've actually asked all the proper questions to vet people, I guess that I think most of the people in this group will keep your safety, but I cannot promise the actions of another individual. I also can't promise that the things that I say will never offend or upset you, because I don't know what your life has been. So you can say something like that. It might scare people a little bit, but it's true. People like the truth. I neither like or dislike you. Like, you're a human being and you're going to inherently like some people more than you like other people. You can say a statement like, I'm going to try as hard as I can to treat everyone fairly. And if something happens that you think is unfair, please approach me about it, or approach my colleague. Hopefully you have another person with you. It's okay. You're a human being. You don't have a switch that flips where you just like don't have any feelings or opinions about clients. You do. You have thoughts and opinions, and sometimes people will trigger you, and that's okay. That's just you being a human being. I know we can help you. Oh, I just skipped over one. Inappropriate self-disclosure. Yeah, so be really measured about the things that you say about yourself. I know in certain fields, and I probably say this in every lecture, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. In my MSW, I had probably at least 1 or 2 people in every class who made tons of inappropriate self-disclosure. And then when I finally got to a class where a professor was like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing this, I was like, oh, I always hated that. I thought I was wrong to hate that. Like, there is sort of an intuitive sense that the group will feel when something isn't in a